The mahogany dining table stretched nearly 20 feet across the private dining room at Windsor Castle, its polished surface reflecting the soft glow of crystal chandeliers that had witnessed countless royal meals over the decades. Queen Elizabeth II sat at the head of the table, her posture impeccable despite her advanced age, while family members and select guests occupied their designated positions according to protocols established long before most of them were born. To the untrained eye, it appeared to be simply another elegant royal dinner, but former palace staff knew better. Every movement, every gesture, every seemingly casual action carried weight and meaning that could influence decisions far beyond the dining room walls. Sarah Mitchell, who served as a palace footman for 12 years, remembered the evening clearly. She had been stationed near the sideboard, ready to attend to any needs that might arise during the private family supper. The Queen appeared relaxed, engaging in pleasant conversation with Prince Charles about his recent charitable endeavors, while Princess Anne discussed her equestrian activities with Prince Andrew. The atmosphere seemed casual and familial, but Sarah noticed something that made her pulse quicken with attention. The Queen's handbag, a simple black leather piece that accompanied her everywhere, had been placed deliberately on the table to her right, positioned at a precise angle that Sarah recognized from her extensive training. This was not merely a convenient spot for the Queen's personal belongings. According to the intricate system of silent communication that had evolved within the royal household over generations, this particular placement meant that Her Majesty wished for the current conversation to conclude within the next 10 minutes. More importantly, it signaled that no new topics of significance should be introduced during the remainder of the meal. Prince Charles, who had been in the middle of explaining his vision for sustainable agriculture initiatives, seemed to instinctively understand the signal. Without any obvious acknowledgement of his mother's gesture, he began to wrap up his discussion, transitioning smoothly from detailed explanations to brief summaries of his key points. Princess Anne, equally attuned to these family communications, shifted her conversation with Prince Andrew toward lighter topics, discussing recent weather patterns and their impact on her weekend writing plans rather than the more serious matter of royal duties she had intended to address. The sophistication of this silent communication system fascinated those who were privileged enough to observe it in action. Unlike the formal protocols that governed public royal appearances, these private dinner gestures had evolved organically over decades of family meals, refined through practice and necessity. The Queen, as the central figure in this complex family dynamic, had developed an extensive vocabulary of subtle signals that allowed her to guide conversations, manage family tensions, and ensure that private meals remained pleasant and productive. Margaret Thompson, who worked as a lady's maid to the Queen for over 15 years, explained that the handbag positioning system included numerous variations, each with its own specific meaning. When placed directly in front of the Queen's plate, it indicated that she wished to speak privately with a specific individual after the meal concluded. A placement to her left suggested that she found the current topic particularly interesting and encouraged continued discussion. The angle of the bag also mattered. A perfectly straight alignment indicated approval or agreement, while a slight diagonal tilt could suggest mild disapproval or the need for caution in the current conversation. But the handbag was only one element in a much larger system of royal dinner table communication. The Queen's handling of her napkin provided another layer of silent messaging that palace staff learned to interpret with remarkable precision. During that same evening at Windsor Castle, Sarah Mitchell observed as Her Majesty carefully folded her napkin into a precise triangle and placed it to the right side of her plate. This action, performed with seeming casualness while she listened to Prince Andrew's account of his recent naval experiences, actually conveyed a specific message to the attending staff. The triangular napkin fold indicated that the Queen was satisfied with the current pace of the meal service and that staff should continue according to the established schedule. A different fold, perhaps a simple rectangle, would have suggested the need for slightly faster service, while leaving the napkin unfolded might indicate that she preferred a more leisurely pace for the evening's dining experience. These signals allowed the Queen to manage the rhythm of family meals without interrupting conversations or drawing attention to the mechanics of royal dining protocol. The development of these gesture systems reflected the unique challenges faced by the royal family during private moments. Unlike public engagements, where formal protocols provided clear structure and guidance, family dinners required a more subtle approach to communication. The Queen, as both monarch and matriarch, needed ways to guide family interactions that would maintain the dignity of her position while preserving the intimacy and warmth that family meals were meant to provide. Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh, had his own repertoire of dinner table signals that complemented and sometimes contrasted with the Queen's more subtle approach. Known for his direct personality and occasional impatience with lengthy discussions, Prince Philip developed a series of cutlery-based gestures that could effectively communicate his feelings about ongoing conversations without requiring him to interrupt or appear rude to family members or guests. During a private dinner in the early spring, attended by several members of the extended royal family, Prince Philip demonstrated one of his most recognizable signals. Lord Peter Snowdon, Princess Margaret's former husband, had been regaling the table with a detailed account of his recent photography exhibition, complete with technical explanations of his artistic choices and the critical reception of his work. While the Queen listened politely and other family members offered appropriate comments and questions, Prince Philip's body language gradually shifted in ways that trained observers could easily interpret. The Duke began by placing his knife and fork parallel to each other on the right side of his plate, both implements pointing toward the center of the table. To casual observers, this might have appeared to be simply a pause in eating, but palace staff recognized it as Prince Philip's standard signal that he found the current conversation unnecessarily lengthy or detailed for a family dinner setting. The parallel placement suggested his desire for the speaker to conclude their remarks and allow the conversation to move toward other topics or participants. As Lord Snowdon continued his detailed artistic explanations, Prince Philip escalated his silent communication by adjusting the angle of his cutlery. He moved both the knife and fork so that they pointed more directly toward the speaker, a positioning that indicated increasing impatience with the ongoing monologue. Finally, when the photography discussion showed no signs of natural conclusion, Prince Philip employed his most direct cutlery signal. He placed his knife perpendicular to his fork, creating a clear cross pattern on his plate. This gesture was unmistakable to anyone familiar with Prince Philip's dinner table communication system. It conveyed not merely impatience, but a clear request for intervention to redirect the conversation. Queen Elizabeth, who had been observing her husband's signals while maintaining her own polite attention to Lord Snowdon's presentation, smoothly intervened by asking Princess Margaret about her recent charitable work, effectively shifting the focus away from the photography discussion and allowing the dinner conversation to move in a new direction. The effectiveness of these royal dinner gestures extended beyond simple family convenience. They served important functions in maintaining the delicate balance between royal dignity and family intimacy that characterized private royal meals. By developing and mastering these silent communication methods, the royal family could address potential social awkwardness, manage difficult personalities, and ensure that family dinners remained pleasant experiences for all participants without resorting to direct confrontation or obvious social correction. Former palace staff members frequently noted that visiting dignitaries and guests who were unfamiliar with these gesture systems often missed crucial social cues during private royal meals. Ambassadors, government officials, and even close family friends sometimes continued conversations or behaviors that were clearly unwelcome, simply because they could not interpret the subtle signals being transmitted across the dinner table. In contrast, those who understood the royal gesture vocabulary found themselves better able to navigate the complex social dynamics of royal dining and often developed stronger relationships with family members as a result. The Queen's strategic use of her teacup provided yet another dimension to the royal dinner communication system. During after-dinner tea service, which followed most private royal meals, Her Majesty's handling of her teacup and saucer conveyed messages about her assessment of the evening's conversation and her plans for the remainder of the gathering. A teacup held with both hands suggested contentment and a desire to continue the social interaction, while single-handed holding might indicate that she was ready to conclude the evening's activities. The positioning of the teacup on its saucer also carried meaning. A cup placed slightly off-center to the right indicated that the Queen wished to speak privately with someone present, while off-center placement to the left suggested that she had heard something during dinner that required further consideration or follow-up. A perfectly centered teacup conveyed satisfaction with the evening's proceedings and indicated that no additional discussion or action was needed from her perspective. These tea-related gestures became particularly important during dinners that included government officials or advisors, where policy discussions or state matters might arise during seemingly casual family conversation. The Queen's teacup signals could indicate whether she wished to pursue certain topics in more detail after the formal dinner concluded, or whether she preferred to consider matters privately before making any decisions or commitments. The sophistication and subtlety of the royal dinner gesture system reflected broader themes in royal life, where public visibility and media attention made private communication increasingly valuable and necessary. As the royal family's public activities became more heavily scrutinized and documented, the ability to communicate privately and effectively during family meals became an essential skill for managing both personal relationships and official responsibilities. The gesture system allowed family members to coordinate their public positions, address sensitive family matters, and maintain the unity and dignity that public appearances required, all while enjoying the relatively relaxed atmosphere of private dining. The crystal water glasses caught the evening light as Prince Charles carefully adjusted his position at the dinner table, his movements deliberate and purposeful in ways that few people beyond the immediate royal family would recognize. As heir to the throne, Charles had spent decades learning not only the public protocols that governed royal appearances, but also the intricate private communication systems that allowed the family to coordinate their positions and manage sensitive discussions during what appeared to be casual family meals. On this particular evening at Sandringham House, the royal family had gathered for what palace staff referred to as a working dinner, a meal that combined family time with informal discussions of upcoming engagements, charitable commitments, and policy considerations that required coordination among senior family members. To outside observers, such dinners appeared to be simply pleasant family gatherings, but they actually served crucial functions in maintaining the effectiveness and unity of the royal household's public activities. Patricia Williams, who served as a palace secretary for over 20 years and frequently attended such dinners to take notes on any decisions or commitments that emerged from family discussions, remembered the evening clearly because it demonstrated the sophisticated level of nonverbal communication that Charles had developed over his decades of preparation for eventual kingship. Unlike his father's more direct approach to dinner table communication, Charles had evolved a style that combined subtlety with clear messaging, reflecting both his diplomatic training and his understanding of the complex family dynamics that shaped royal decision-making. The conversation that evening had turned to the allocation of royal patronages, a subject that required careful consideration of family interests, public expectations, and the personal preferences of individual royal family members. Princess Anne had expressed interest in taking on additional environmental causes, while Prince Andrew had suggested expanding his involvement with trade and industry organizations. The discussion was proceeding smoothly when Charles began to demonstrate one of his most sophisticated communication techniques. Rather than using dramatic gestures or obvious signals, Charles began to modify his interaction with the bread service in ways that conveyed specific messages about the topics being discussed. When Princess Anne outlined her environmental interests, Charles accepted a piece of bread from the serving platter and placed it directly on his bread plate without any additional actions. This simple acceptance indicated his approval and support for her proposal, signaling that he saw no conflicts or concerns with her suggested patronage expansion. However, when Prince Andrew began describing his trade organization interests, Charles's approach to the bread service changed noticeably. He accepted bread from the platter but then used his butter knife to cut it into precise geometric shapes, first dividing it into quarters, then further subdividing one quarter into smaller triangular pieces. This deliberate manipulation of the bread served as a clear signal that he believed Andrew's proposal required more detailed consideration and possibly modification before implementation. The bread cutting technique had evolved over years of family dinners where sensitive topics required discussion without creating obvious disagreement or conflict. Charles had learned that direct verbal opposition to family members' proposals could create tension and hurt feelings that might persist beyond the immediate dinner conversation. The bread manipulation system allowed him to indicate varying levels of support, concern, or need for modification while maintaining the pleasant family atmosphere that made such discussions possible in the first place. Queen Elizabeth, who had been observing her son's bread signals while contributing her own comments to the conversation, responded with her own gesture vocabulary. She began to adjust her water glass position in ways that indicated her assessment of the proposals being discussed. A glass moved slightly closer to her plate suggested agreement with Charles's cautious approach to Andrew's suggestions, while positioning it at its original location would have indicated that she saw no problems with proceeding as proposed. The water glass positioning system represented one of the Queen's more subtle communication methods, developed over decades of presiding over family discussions where her opinion carried enormous weight but needed to be expressed carefully to avoid overwhelming other family members' contributions. Unlike her handbag signals, which could be quite direct and immediate in their impact, the water glass adjustments provided a way for her to indicate her thinking without immediately terminating discussion or debate. Prince Andrew, who had grown up within this system of family communication, understood the signals he was receiving from both his mother and his older brother. Rather than becoming defensive about the implied concerns regarding his trade organization proposal, he began to modify his presentation, adding details about how his suggested patronages would complement rather than compete with existing royal charitable work. His response demonstrated the effectiveness of the gesture system in facilitating productive family discussions that might otherwise become confrontational or unproductive. The sophistication of these dinner table communications became even more apparent when the conversation shifted to scheduling coordination for upcoming royal engagements. Princess Anne needed to discuss potential conflicts between her Olympic Committee commitments and proposed state visit activities, while Charles had concerns about coordinating his environmental initiatives with official government policy announcements. These topics required careful handling because they involved not only family coordination but also consideration of broader political and diplomatic implications. Charles employed another element of his gesture vocabulary by adjusting his napkin positioning in specific patterns that indicated the level of sensitivity he attached to different aspects of the scheduling discussion. When Anne mentioned her Olympic commitments, he folded his napkin in half and placed it parallel to his plate's edge, indicating that he viewed this as a manageable coordination issue that could be resolved through normal scheduling procedures. However, when the conversation turned to coordination with government policy announcements, Charles's napkin handling changed dramatically. He unfolded the napkin completely and, then, refolded into a complex pattern that resembled a pocket square, finally, positioning it at an angle across his lap. This elaborate manipulation served as a clear signal that he considered the topic highly sensitive and requiring careful private discussion before any public commitments were made. The napkin positioning system reflected Charles's growing responsibility for managing the political dimensions of royal activities as heir to the throne. Unlike other family members, whose charitable and ceremonial activities were important but rarely carried significant political implications, Charles's public positions and statements were increasingly scrutinized for their potential impact on government policy and public opinion. His gesture vocabulary had evolved to help him navigate these complexities during family discussions where political sensitivity needed to be balanced with family openness and coordination. Queen Elizabeth responded to Charles's sensitivity signals by implementing her own diplomatic communication technique. She began to use her silverware in patterns that indicated her understanding of the political delicacy involved in coordinating royal activities with government initiatives. By arranging her silverware in specific configurations, knife and fork position to create subtle geometric patterns, she could indicate whether she believed certain topics should be discussed privately after dinner, referred to palace advisors for detailed analysis, or addressed through formal consultation with government officials. The silverware positioning system represented one of the most sophisticated elements in the royal dinner communication vocabulary because it allowed for multiple layers of meaning to be conveyed simultaneously. The basic positioning could indicate general approval or concern, while more complex arrangements could specify the type of follow-up action that seemed most appropriate for particular issues. This multi-layered communication capability was essential for managing the complex coordination required between family activities and official state functions. Princess Anne, whose practical personality and direct communication style made her somewhat less inclined toward elaborate gesture systems, had developed her own streamlined version of dinner table signaling that complemented the more complex approaches used by her mother and brother. Her primary technique involved the strategic use of her wine glass, which she would position and reposition to indicate her level of engagement with different aspects of family discussions. When Anne moved her wine glass closer to the center of the table, it indicated her strong interest in the topic being discussed and her desire to contribute significantly to the conversation. A glass positioned at the standard location suggested normal engagement, while movement away from the table center could indicate either disinterest or concern about the direction of the discussion. This relatively simple system allowed Anne to participate effectively in the family's gesture-based communication while maintaining her preference for straightforward interaction styles. The coordination between different family members' gesture systems created a complex but effective communication network that allowed the royal family to discuss sensitive topics, coordinate public activities, and manage family relationships with remarkable efficiency during private dinners. Palace staff who observed these interactions consistently noted the family's ability to address potentially contentious issues without creating obvious conflict or tension, largely because the gesture systems allowed concerns and disagreements to be expressed and acknowledged without requiring direct confrontation. The effectiveness of these communication methods became particularly apparent during dinners that included extended family members or close family friends who were not fully familiar with the gesture vocabulary. Such occasions often revealed the sophistication of the communication system through the contrast between family members' smooth coordination and visitors' occasional confusion about the subtle dynamics of royal dinner conversations. Guests might notice that topics seemed to change direction unexpectedly, or that family members appeared to reach understanding about complex issues with remarkably little verbal discussion, but they rarely understood the intricate silent communication that was actually facilitating these smooth interactions. The development and refinement of these gesture systems reflected broader changes in royal life over the decades, as increasing media attention and public scrutiny made private family communication increasingly valuable. The ability to discuss sensitive family matters, coordinate public positions, and address potential conflicts during private meals became an essential element in maintaining both family unity and public effectiveness. The dinner table gesture vocabulary represented a creative and sophisticated response to the unique challenges faced by a family whose private relationships had significant public implications and whose family decisions could influence national and international affairs. The bread, silverware, glass, and napkin positioning systems also served important psychological functions for family members who spent much of their public lives following predetermined protocols and scripts. The gesture vocabulary provided a way for individual personality and opinion to be expressed within the structured environment of royal family life, allowing for personal communication and individual influence while maintaining the coordination and unity that public royal activities required. This balance between personal expression and family coordination was essential for maintaining healthy family relationships under the unique pressures and responsibilities of royal life. The autumn rain drummed steadily against the tall windows of Balmoral Castle as the royal family gathered for their traditional Thursday evening dinner, a weekly ritual that had become increasingly important for maintaining family cohesion during a particularly challenging period in royal history. Recent media coverage had been unusually critical, questioning the relevance of the monarchy in modern British society and scrutinizing individual family members' activities with unprecedented intensity. In this environment, the family's private dinner conversations had taken on new significance as opportunities to coordinate responses, support one another, and maintain the unity that public challenges required. Diana, Princess of Wales, sat across from Prince Charles, their relationship publicly strained but their need for coordination in royal activities still requiring careful management. The dinner table had become a neutral ground where personal differences needed to be set aside in favor of shared responsibilities to the institution they both represented. For palace staff who observed these dinners, the evening would demonstrate both the power and the limitations of the royal gesture communication system in managing complex family dynamics during times of crisis. Jennifer Morrison, who served as Prince Charles's private secretary and often attended family dinners to coordinate scheduling and public appearances, remembered the evening as a masterclass in royal diplomatic communication. Despite the obvious tension between Charles and Diana, both had arrived at dinner prepared to engage in the type of professional collaboration that their public roles required, using the family's gesture vocabulary to navigate personal difficulties while addressing shared responsibilities. The conversation that evening focused on an upcoming joint charitable appearance that would require Charles and Diana to present a united front despite their well-documented marital difficulties. The event involved a major children's hospital fundraiser where both their individual charitable interests intersected, making their collaboration essential for the success of the initiative. However, coordinating their approach required discussing sensitive aspects of their public relationship that could easily become emotionally charged if handled through direct conversation. Diana began the evening by implementing one of the more sophisticated elements of royal dinner communication, the strategic use of serving pieces to indicate her willingness to cooperate professionally despite personal difficulties. When the main course was served, she made a point of offering to serve Charles from the shared platter, a gesture that indicated her commitment to maintaining the collaborative relationship that their royal duties required. This action served multiple functions. It demonstrated courtesy and respect, signaled her intention to prioritize shared responsibilities over personal conflicts, and provided a visual cue to other family members that she was approaching the evening's discussions in a constructive spirit. Charles responded to Diana's collaborative signal by implementing his own gesture vocabulary in ways that acknowledged her professional commitment while maintaining appropriate personal boundaries. Rather than simply accepting her serving offer, he requested specific portions and expressed particular preferences for side dishes, actions that indicated his appreciation for her cooperation while maintaining the type of detailed interaction that suggested ongoing professional partnership. His responses were carefully calibrated to show respect for Diana's gesture without implying a level of personal intimacy that neither of them was prepared to maintain. Queen Elizabeth, who had been observing this careful interaction between her son and daughter-in-law, began to employ her own gesture techniques to facilitate productive discussion of the upcoming charitable event while minimizing the potential for personal conflict. She used her bread plate positioning to indicate topics that she believed could be discussed openly at the family table versus those that might require private consultation between Charles and Diana after dinner. When Diana mentioned her ideas for incorporating children's perspectives into the hospital fundraiser presentation, the Queen moved her bread plate slightly closer to the center of the table, indicating that she viewed this as an excellent topic for family discussion that could benefit from input from other family members. Princess Anne and Prince Andrew both had experience with children's charities, and their suggestions could help strengthen the overall approach while allowing Charles and Diana to focus their private planning discussions on coordination details rather than fundamental strategic decisions. However, when the conversation touched on media coordination and public messaging for the event, the Queen adjusted her bread plate position to create more distance from the table center. This signal indicated her belief that such topics required careful private discussion between Charles and Diana, possibly with input from palace press officials, but were not appropriate for general family conversation. The gesture effectively guided the dinner discussion away from potentially sensitive areas while ensuring that important collaborative planning could continue in more appropriate settings. Diana, who had become increasingly skilled at reading royal family communication signals during her years of marriage to Charles, understood the Queen's guidance and began to adjust her own participation in the conversation accordingly. She used her water glass positioning to indicate which aspects of the charitable event planning she was comfortable discussing at the family table versus those she preferred to address privately with Charles and their respective staffs. A water glass moved slightly toward Charles's place setting indicated topics where she sought his direct input or coordination. When discussing the timeline for hospital visits and patient interactions, Diana positioned her glass to suggest that she and Charles needed to coordinate their schedules carefully to ensure effective coverage of different hospital departments without overwhelming individual patients or staff. This positioning allowed them to acknowledge their need for detailed coordination without requiring immediate resolution of complex scheduling issues at the family dinner table. Conversely, when media strategy topics arose in the conversation, Diana moved her water glass to a more neutral position, indicating that she preferred to handle such matters through her own press representatives with appropriate coordination through palace communications staff. This positioning allowed her to maintain professional collaboration with Charles while preserving her autonomy in managing her public image and media relationships. The effectiveness of these gesture-based communications became particularly apparent when Prince Philip joined the conversation with his characteristic directness about the importance of presenting royal unity during public charitable events. Rather than creating tension by directly addressing Charles and Diana's marital difficulties, Philip used his cutlery positioning to emphasize points about institutional responsibility and family coordination that applied to all royal family members regardless of personal relationships. Philip arranged his knife and fork in parallel lines pointing toward the center of the table, a positioning that indicated his emphasis on collective royal responsibility and shared commitment to charitable effectiveness. This gesture allowed him to communicate expectations for professional collaboration without singling out any particular family members or making obvious reference to personal conflicts that might be affecting royal activities. Charles and Diana both responded to Philip's institutional emphasis by adjusting their own gesture vocabulary to demonstrate their understanding of and commitment to royal responsibilities that transcended personal difficulties. Charles began using his napkin positioning to indicate specific areas where he believed coordination with Diana was essential for charitable effectiveness, while Diana used her silverware arrangements to show her agreement with the institutional priorities that Philip had emphasized. The napkin and silverware coordination between Charles and Diana created a visual representation of their professional partnership that was evident to other family members while requiring no verbal acknowledgement of personal issues that might disrupt family dinner conversation. This sophisticated level of nonverbal communication allowed them to address necessary coordination topics while maintaining the type of family dinner atmosphere that served everyone's emotional and practical needs. Princess Anne, observing the careful coordination between Charles and Diana, began to contribute her own gesture signals that offered support for their collaborative efforts while acknowledging the challenges they faced in maintaining professional partnership during personal difficulties. Anne's approach involved using her wineglass positioning to indicate her availability to assist with coordination issues that might benefit from involvement by other family members, while also signaling her respect for the privacy boundaries that Charles and Diana needed to maintain around their personal relationship. When Diana outlined her plans for incorporating patient feedback into the hospital fundraiser approach, and moved her wineglass to a position that indicated strong support and willingness to share her own experience with medical charity events. This positioning offered collaborative assistance while respecting Diana's leadership role in the project and avoiding any appearance of interference in the coordination process between Charles and Diana. The multi-layered gesture communication that developed during this dinner demonstrated the royal family's remarkable ability to maintain both institutional effectiveness and family cohesion during periods of personal difficulty. The gesture vocabulary allowed family members to address necessary practical coordination while providing emotional support and maintaining personal boundaries that made continued collaboration possible. The psychological benefits of this sophisticated communication system extended beyond simple practical coordination. For Charles and Diana, the ability to demonstrate mutual professional respect through gesture vocabulary helped maintain their shared commitment to royal responsibilities even when direct personal communication was difficult. The public effectiveness of their joint charitable appearances depended partly on their ability to present genuine collaboration, and the gesture system provided a framework for developing and maintaining that collaboration despite personal challenges. For Queen Elizabeth and other family members, the gesture vocabulary provided ways to offer support and guidance to Charles and Diana without interfering inappropriately in their personal relationship or creating additional pressure during an already difficult period. The system allowed the family to maintain unity and mutual support while respecting individual autonomy and privacy needs that were essential for long-term family stability. The dinner also revealed the flexibility and adaptability of the royal gesture system in responding to changing family dynamics and external pressures. While the basic elements of the communication vocabulary remained consistent, individual family members could modify and adapt their gesture use to address specific situations and relationships, ensuring that the system remained effective even when family circumstances changed dramatically. The success of the evening's coordination efforts, measured partly through the effectiveness of the subsequent charitable event, demonstrated that royal gesture communication could serve essential functions in maintaining institutional effectiveness even during periods of significant personal and family stress. The hospital fundraiser achieved its financial goals and received positive media coverage that enhanced public perception of royal charitable work, outcomes that were facilitated by the type of coordination that the gesture-based dinner conversation had made possible. The private dining room at Kensington Palace buzzed with the excited chatter of young voices as Prince William and Prince Harry, now in their teens, joined their parents and grandparents for a special family dinner celebrating Prince Charles's latest environmental initiative. For the palace staff observing the evening, this dinner would prove particularly significant because it demonstrated how the royal gesture communication system was being adapted and transmitted to the next generation of royals, who would need to master these skills for their own future roles within the institution. Rebecca Matthews, who served as a nanny to the young princes and often attended family dinners to help with their social development, watched with fascination as both William and Harry displayed increasing sophistication in their understanding of royal family communication patterns. Unlike their earlier childhood years, when family dinners were primarily opportunities for basic etiquette training, these teenage gatherings had evolved into important learning experiences where the princes could observe and practice the complex social skills they would need as adult members of the royal family. Prince William, as the elder son and heir to the throne after his father, had begun to develop his own personal style within the established gesture vocabulary, combining elements he had observed from various family members with innovations that reflected his own personality and generation's communication preferences. His approach tended to be more direct than his grandmother's subtle techniques but more diplomatic than his grandfather's sometimes blunt signaling methods. During the dinner conversation about Charles's environmental work, William demonstrated his evolving gesture vocabulary by using his bread roll in a distinctly modern adaptation of traditional royal dinner communication. When his father described plans for expanding renewable energy initiatives on royal estates, William broke his bread roll into precisely 4 equal pieces, arranging them in a square pattern on his bread plate. This geometric arrangement indicated his systematic approach to evaluating the proposal, suggesting that he was mentally organizing the initiative into component parts for detailed consideration. The bread arrangement technique represented William's personal contribution to the family's gesture vocabulary, reflecting his generation's preference for structured analytical thinking while maintaining connection to traditional royal communication methods. Unlike older family members who might indicate general approval or concern through their gestures, William's approach provided more specific information about his thinking process and the type of detailed discussion he believed the topic deserved. Prince Harry, whose personality tended toward more spontaneous expression than his brother's methodical approach, had developed his own distinctive style within the royal gesture system. Rather than creating complex patterns with food items or table implements, Harry used body language and positioning to communicate his engagement with family discussions. His technique involved subtle changes in posture and orientation that indicated his level of interest, agreement, or concern about topics being addressed. When the conversation turned to plans for involving young people in environmental education programs, Harry shifted his posture to lean slightly forward and angled his chair to face more directly toward his father. This positioning indicated strong personal interest in the topic and willingness to contribute actively to the discussion. Palace staff recognized this as Harry's version of the supportive positioning that other family members achieved through more traditional gesture techniques. Princess Diana, who had been observing her son's developing communication skills throughout the dinner, began to employ her own gesture vocabulary to encourage and guide their participation in family discussions. Her approach involved strategic use of her napkin positioning to indicate when she believed the boys' input would be particularly valuable, while also signaling when topics might be too sensitive or complex for their current level of experience with royal responsibilities. When William asked detailed questions about the financial aspects of the renewable energy initiatives, Diana folded her napkin into a neat rectangle and placed it parallel to her plate edge, indicating her approval of his analytical approach while suggesting that such detailed financial discussions might be more appropriate for private conversation between William and his father after dinner. This guidance allowed William to demonstrate his serious engagement with royal responsibilities while ensuring that family dinner conversation remained accessible to all participants. Queen Elizabeth, who had been watching her grandson's developing mastery of family communication patterns with evident satisfaction, began to implement her own teaching approach through gesture modeling. Rather than explicitly instructing the boys about proper communication techniques, she demonstrated increasingly sophisticated versions of her standard gesture vocabulary, providing examples that they could observe and learn from without feeling overwhelmed by formal instruction. When Harry expressed enthusiasm about participating in youth environmental programs, the Queen used her teacup handling to indicate different levels of appropriateness for various types of royal involvement. A teacup held with both hands indicated activities that would be suitable for Harry's current age and experience level, while single-handed holding suggested programs that might be more appropriate for his participation in a few years when he had gained additional experience with public responsibilities. The teacup positioning system allowed the Queen to provide guidance about appropriate royal activities without dampening Harry's enthusiasm or making him feel excluded from important family initiatives. This approach reflected the sophisticated balance required in training young royals to understand their future responsibilities while allowing them to develop their own interests and personalities within the institutional framework. Prince Charles, observing both his son's growing sophistication and his mother's teaching approach, began to incorporate specific educational elements into his own gesture vocabulary during family dinners. His technique involved using his silverware arrangements to demonstrate different approaches to handling complex royal responsibilities, providing the boys with examples of decision-making processes and stakeholder coordination that they would need to master as adult royals. When discussing the coordination required between his environmental initiatives and government policy, Charles arranged his knife and fork in patterns that illustrated different types of institutional relationships. Parallel positioning indicated areas where royal and government activities could proceed in coordination, while crossed positioning showed topics where careful consultation and negotiation were required to avoid conflicts or misunderstandings. This visual representation of complex institutional relationships provided William and Harry with concrete examples of the type of strategic thinking that royal responsibilities required, while allowing them to observe these concepts during casual family conversation rather than formal instruction sessions. The approach reflected Charles's understanding that effective royal education needed to integrate seamlessly with family life to ensure that institutional knowledge became natural and instinctive rather than artificial or burdensome. The dinner also demonstrated how the gesture communication system facilitated intergenerational knowledge transfer within the royal family. Older family members could provide guidance and teaching through their gesture vocabulary, while younger members could indicate their understanding and ask for clarification through their own developing communication techniques. This process ensured that essential institutional knowledge was transmitted effectively while maintaining the natural family dynamics that were crucial for healthy personal development. Prince Philip contributed to the educational atmosphere by demonstrating his own gesture techniques in ways that emphasized the practical benefits of effective royal communication. When William asked about balancing environmental advocacy with political neutrality, Philip used his cutlery positioning to illustrate different approaches to expressing royal views on policy issues without creating inappropriate political conflicts. Philip's demonstration involved arranging his knife and fork in various configurations that represented different levels of royal engagement with controversial topics. Some arrangements indicated safe approaches that allowed royals to express general support for beneficial causes, while others showed positioning that might create political complications requiring careful consideration. This practical instruction provided the boys with concrete tools for navigating the complex political environment they would face as adult royals. The educational value of these dinner conversations extended beyond simple protocol training to include important lessons about family cooperation and institutional loyalty. William and Harry observed how their parents, despite personal differences, maintained professional collaboration in royal activities and presented united support for institutional priorities during family discussions. This example provided crucial modeling for their own future relationships and responsibilities as senior royals. The gesture communication system also served important functions in helping the young princes develop confidence in their ability to participate meaningfully in royal activities. By mastering the family's communication vocabulary, they gained tools for expressing their own ideas and concerns during family discussions while demonstrating their understanding of royal responsibilities and institutional requirements. As the dinner progressed, both William and Harry began to coordinate their gesture use in ways that showed their developing understanding of collaborative royal communication. When discussing potential youth involvement in environmental education programs, they used complementary napkin positioning and silverware arrangements to indicate their shared enthusiasm while acknowledging their different personal interests within the broader initiative. William's systematic bread arrangement approach combined with Harry's engaged body positioning created a visual representation of their partnership in approaching royal responsibilities, while their individual gesture styles reflected their distinct personalities and contributions to family activities. This coordination demonstrated that they were learning not only individual communication skills but also the collaborative techniques that would be essential for their effectiveness as adult members of the royal family. The evening concluded with a complex display of intergenerational gesture communication as family members used their various techniques to coordinate plans for the prince's gradual increased involvement in Charles's environmental initiatives. The Queen's teacup positioning indicated her approval for specific types of youth participation, while Charles's silverware arrangements showed the coordination that would be required with educational institutions and youth organizations. Diana's napkin positioning suggested appropriate timelines for increased royal responsibilities, while Philip's cutlery signals indicated practical considerations that needed attention in planning youth-focused royal activities. The coordinated gesture communication allowed the family to develop comprehensive plans for William and Harry's expanding royal roles while maintaining the pleasant family dinner atmosphere that made such collaborative planning possible and enjoyable for all participants, especially the young princes who were learning to see royal responsibilities as exciting opportunities rather than burdensome obligations. The gleaming modern dining room at Catherine and William's apartment in Kensington Palace represented a new era in royal family life, where traditional protocols merged with contemporary family dynamics to create unique challenges and opportunities for royal communication. As the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge hosted their first major family dinner as a married couple, with Queen Elizabeth, Prince Charles, and other senior family members in attendance, the evening would demonstrate how the ancient art of royal gesture communication was evolving to meet the needs of a new generation of royals operating in an increasingly connected and scrutinized world. Sophie Reynolds, who served as Catherine's private secretary and had spent months studying royal protocols to better support the new Duchess, observed the evening with particular interest because it represented Catherine's debut in the complex world of royal family communication. Unlike family members who had grown up within the gesture system, Catherine needed to master these sophisticated communication techniques while simultaneously establishing her own role within the family hierarchy and managing her adjustment to royal life. Catherine began the evening by demonstrating remarkable intuitive understanding of royal dinner protocols, using her napkin positioning to indicate her respect for family traditions while subtly establishing her own communication style. When Queen Elizabeth arrived and took her customary position at the head of the table, Catherine carefully arranged her napkin in a precise triangle that mirrored the Queen's preferred folding pattern, indicating her commitment to maintaining established family customs while learning the intricate social dynamics that govern royal family interactions. The napkin mirroring technique represented Catherine's sophisticated approach to entering the royal family communication system. Rather than immediately attempting to establish her own distinctive gesture vocabulary, she demonstrated respect for existing traditions while gradually incorporating personal elements that reflected her own personality and communication preferences. This approach allowed her to participate meaningfully in family gesture communication while avoiding potential conflicts with established family members who might be sensitive to rapid changes in traditional practices. Prince William, observing his wife's careful navigation of family communication protocols, began to employ his own gesture vocabulary to provide support and guidance that would help Catherine feel more confident in her interactions with senior family members. His technique involved strategic coordination of his silverware positioning with Catherine's napkin signals, creating a visual partnership that indicated their united approach to royal responsibilities while demonstrating William's role in helping Catherine adapt to royal family life. When the conversation turned to plans for Catherine's first major solo charitable engagement, William arranged his knife and fork in parallel lines that pointed toward Catherine's place setting, indicating his support for her initiative while suggesting that he was available for consultation and coordination but recognized her autonomy in developing her own charitable focus. This silverware positioning allowed him to demonstrate husbandly support while respecting the independence that would be essential for Catherine's effectiveness as a senior royal family member. Queen Elizabeth, who had been observing Catherine's initial efforts at royal gesture communication with evident approval, began to implement her own teaching approach through subtle modifications of her traditional gesture vocabulary. Rather than using her standard handbag positioning techniques, which might overwhelm a newcomer to royal communication, the Queen employed simpler teacup positioning signals that would be easier for Catherine to interpret while still maintaining the effectiveness of family coordination during dinner discussions. When Catherine expressed interest in children's charities and education programs, the Queen moved her teacup slightly closer to the center of the table, indicating strong approval and encouragement for Catherine's charitable interests. This positioning suggested that the Queen viewed Catherine's proposed focus as an excellent complement to existing royal charitable work and indicated her willingness to provide guidance and support for Catherine's developing role as a working royal. The Queen's simplified gesture approach reflected her understanding that effective royal communication required adaptation to changing family circumstances and new participants. By modifying her traditional techniques to be more accessible to Catherine while maintaining their essential functions, the Queen demonstrated the flexibility and evolutionary nature of royal gesture communication that had allowed the system to remain effective across generations of changing family dynamics. Prince Charles, who had been watching Catherine's careful entry into royal family communication with satisfaction, began to coordinate his own gesture signals with those of his mother and son to create a supportive communication environment that would encourage Catherine's confidence while ensuring that important family coordination could continue effectively. His approach involved using his bread plate positioning to indicate topics where Catherine's input would be particularly valuable, while employing silverware signals to show areas where her developing experience with royal protocols might benefit from additional guidance. When the discussion turned to coordinating Catherine's charitable activities with existing royal patronages to avoid conflicts or duplication of effort, Charles positioned his bread plate at a slight angle that indicated the complexity of royal charitable coordination while using his fork placement to suggest that Catherine's education background provided valuable perspectives that could enhance overall royal charitable effectiveness. This combination of signals encouraged Catherine's active participation in family planning while acknowledging the learning process involved in mastering royal responsibilities. Catherine responded to the family's supportive gesture signals by beginning to develop her own personal communication style that built upon the techniques she was learning from other family members. Her approach involved strategic use of her water glass positioning to indicate her confidence levels with different aspects of royal responsibility, allowing family members to provide appropriate levels of support and guidance while respecting her growing autonomy as a working royal. When discussing media coordination for her upcoming charitable engagements, Catherine moved her water glass to a position that indicated her comfort with basic media protocols while suggesting that she would appreciate guidance about more complex press situations that might arise during high-profile royal events. This positioning allowed her to demonstrate growing competence while acknowledging areas where additional experience and mentoring would be beneficial. The water glass positioning technique represented Catherine's contribution to the evolution of royal gesture communication, reflecting her generation's preference for direct communication about learning needs and support requirements. Unlike traditional royal communication that often emphasized maintaining appearances of complete competence, Catherine's approach acknowledged the learning process involved in mastering royal responsibilities while demonstrating her commitment to achieving effectiveness in her new role. Prince Harry, who had been observing his sister-in-law's adaptation to royal family communication with evident admiration, began to employ his own gesture vocabulary to provide peer support that complemented the guidance Catherine was receiving from senior family members. His technique involved strategic body positioning that indicated his availability as a resource for understanding royal protocols while demonstrating respect for the primary mentoring relationship that Catherine was developing with Queen Elizabeth and Prince Charles. When Catherine asked questions about balancing public responsibilities with private family time, Harry shifted his posture to create a more inclusive conversation arrangement that encouraged open discussion of challenges faced by younger generation royals. This positioning indicated his willingness to share his own experiences with royal life while respecting Catherine's need to develop her own approaches to managing the unique pressures and opportunities of royal family membership. The dinner conversation also revealed how modern technology and media coverage were influencing the evolution of royal gesture communication. Family members needed to coordinate their responses to social media coverage, digital photography, and instant global communication in ways that previous generations of royals had never faced. The gesture vocabulary was adapting to include signals about digital media coordination and online presence management that reflected contemporary realities of royal public life. Catherine demonstrated remarkable insight into these modern challenges by using her napkin positioning to indicate different levels of comfort with various types of digital media coverage. A napkin folded and positioned to her left indicated her willingness to engage with traditional media coverage, while positioning to her right suggested her preference for careful coordination before engaging with social media platforms or digital initiatives that required more complex strategic consideration. This modern adaptation of traditional royal gesture communication reflected Catherine's generation's natural understanding of digital communication while maintaining connection to established royal protocols. Her approach provided a model for how royal families could maintain their traditional coordination effectiveness while adapting to rapidly changing media and communication environments. As the evening progressed, the family's gesture coordination became increasingly sophisticated, with multiple family members using complementary signals to support Catherine's developing confidence while ensuring that essential royal business could be conducted effectively. The Queen's teacup positioning coordinated with Charles's silverware arrangements and William's bread plate signals to create a comprehensive communication network that facilitated productive discussion while maintaining the supportive atmosphere Catherine needed for successful adaptation to royal life. The dinner concluded with a remarkable display of intergenerational royal communication as family members coordinated their gesture signals to develop comprehensive plans for Catherine's first year as a working royal. The Queen's final teacup positioning indicated her complete confidence in Catherine's potential for royal effectiveness, while Charles's silverware arrangements showed the institutional support that would be available for her charitable initiatives. William's coordinated bread and silverware signals demonstrated his partnership with Catherine in developing their shared approach to royal responsibilities, while Harry's supportive body positioning indicated the family unity that would help Catherine navigate the challenges and opportunities of royal life. The coordinated gesture communication allowed the family to address practical planning needs while celebrating Catherine's successful integration into the sophisticated social and institutional dynamics that define royal family life. The evening's success, measured both through effective coordination of Catherine's developing royal role and through the positive family dynamics that supported her adaptation, demonstrated the continued relevance and effectiveness of royal gesture communication in meeting the evolving needs of the modern monarchy. The ancient art of silent coordination had once again proven its value in facilitating family unity and institutional effectiveness, even as it adapted to serve new participants and contemporary challenges that would have been unimaginable to previous generations of royals who had developed and refined these remarkable communication techniques.